The night my son told me the cabin was no place for an old woman in winter, I drove the 4 hours back to Thunder Bay in the dark, and the next morning I called a lawyer and took my name off the deed to the very land he was standing on. 3 weeks later, he found out, and the phone has not stopped ringing since. Good morning, my friends. It's Donna here again, and I'm so glad you came back. Before I get into it, do me a favor and tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Pour yourself a coffee. This one took me a long time to be able to say out loud. I'm 72 years old. I spent 41 winters teaching grade 4 at the same elementary school in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I raised one son, Russell, mostly on my own after his father, my husband Wallace, passed from a heart attack the spring Russell turned 19. Wallace and I had built something modest but real, a brick bungalow off Algoma Street. A registered retirement savings plan we'd fed faithfully for 30 years. And the thing that mattered most to both of us, 80 acres of bush up near Dorion, with a log cabin Wallace built with his own 2 hands the summer we got married in 1973. That cabin was where Russell learned to fish, where Wallace taught him to split wood, to read the ice, to believe a place better than he found it. When Wallace died, that land became the closest thing I had to having him still in the room. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I was not a controlling mother. People always assume that when they hear these stories, that the mother must have done something, must have hovered, must have made herself impossible to love. So let me say it plainly. After Wallace died, I gave Russell room. When he married Brittany, I stepped back. When they had the twins, Hannah and little Oliver, I never showed up unannounced, never criticized her cooking, never offered advice she didn't ask for. I drove the 4 hours down to Mississauga twice a year and stayed in a hotel so I wouldn't be underfoot. I was the kind of grandmother who mailed birthday cards with a $20 bill tucked inside and waited to be invited. And I helped. Lord, did I help. When Russell and Brittany bought their house in 2019, the market in the GTA was insane, and they were $40,000 short on the down payment. I cashed in a chunk of my RRSP, paid the tax penalty without a word of complaint, and wired them the money. "We'll pay you back, Mom, every cent," Russell said. I told him not to worry about it. That's what the money was for. When Brittany wanted to start her own marketing business, I co-signed a line of credit. When the twins started at that private French immersion school, I covered the first 2 years of tuition. I never kept a ledger. I never thought I'd need one. Looking back now, I can see exactly when things started to turn, the way you can only ever see these things looking back. It was about 1.5 years ago. The calls got shorter. Russell used to phone me on Sunday evenings. We'd talk for 45 minutes about nothing, about the Jays, about the weather coming off the lake. Then the calls started landing on Tuesday, if they came at all, and they lasted 4 minutes. When I'd asked to FaceTime with the kids, Brittany would say they were at an activity. There was always an activity. I told myself it was normal. Young families are busy. I've been busy once, too, juggling a classroom of 9-year-olds and a husband and a boy of my own. I understood busy, but I didn't understand the coldness. That's a different thing entirely. There's a particular kind of cold that comes off a person you love when they've started to think of you as a problem to be managed. I felt it before I could name it. The first time I really felt it was that past Thanksgiving. Canadian Thanksgiving, the second Monday of October. I'd asked weeks ahead whether I should drive down, whether they were hosting. The answer took 5 days to come, and when it did, it was a text from Brittany, not Russell. "We're keeping it small this year. Just us and my parents. We'll do something with you at Christmas, that little XO at the end." I read it standing at my kitchen counter, and I felt something in my chest go tight and quiet. Just us and her parents. Her parents lived 20 minutes away and saw those children every week. I lived 4 hours away and saw them twice a year, and I was the one being kept small. I didn't make a fuss. That's not how I was raised. I sent a card, I sent the kids each a check, and I cooked a turkey breast for myself and ate it watching the news. I told myself Christmas would be different. Christmas was the cabin. Every year since Wallace died, I'd hosted Christmas at the cabin in Dorian. Not Christmas Day, too much driving on icy roads, but the weekend before. Russell would bring the family up. We'd cut a tree off our own land. We'd light the wood stove Wallace installed. And for 2 days, the cabin would smell like balsam and cinnamon and wood smoke. It was the one tradition I'd held on to with both hands. The kids loved it. Or I thought they did. This year, when I called Russell in late November to confirm the weekend, there was a long pause on the line. And then he said the thing that I will hear in my head for the rest of my life. Mom, listen, we've been talking, and we don't think the cabin's a good idea anymore. It's no place for an old woman in winter. The roads, the wood stove, it's a liability. And honestly, the kids find it kind of boring up there. Brittany's parents have a place in Collingwood now. There's skiing. The kids love it. We're going to do Christmas there this year. A liability. An old woman. Boring. I stood in my kitchen on Algoma Street with the phone against my ear, and I looked out at the snow coming down on Wallace's bird feeder, and I made myself ask him, very calmly, Russell, are you saying you don't want to come to the cabin? Or are you saying you don't want me to come at all? There was another pause, and in that pause I heard Brittany's voice in the background, low, and I heard my son's resolve harden around whatever she said. Mom, don't make this dramatic. We just think it's time. The cabin's a money pit anyway. You should really think about selling it. That land's worth a fortune now, and you could use the cash, living on a teacher's pension. We could even help you find a realtor. You could use the cash, help you find a realtor. And there it was. There was the whole thing, laid out plain. If I'd only had the courage to look at it sooner. I told him I had to go, that something was burning on the stove. Nothing was burning. I hung up and I sat down at Wallace's old kitchen table, and I did not cry. I was too far past crying. I sat there until the kitchen went dark and the only light was the snow. Now, here is the part where I think a lot of people would have caved. Would have driven to Collingwood, would have shown up with gifts and a brave face, would have taken the seat at the edge of someone else's family Christmas, just to be near the grandchildren. I almost did. I had my bag half packed. I want to be honest about that, because if you're listening to this and you're in the same place, bag half packed, pride half swallowed, I want you to know I understand exactly how strong that pull is, but I didn't go. Instead, the Monday morning after that phone call, I did something I had never done in my life. I called a lawyer. Her name was Miss O'Coffer, a sharp, kind woman with an office downtown overlooking the harbor, and she'd been recommended by my friend at the church, a retired notary. I told her everything, sitting in her office with my coat still on. The down payment, the line of credit, the tuition, the Thanksgiving text, the phone call, the land. She listened without writing anything for a long time, and then she said, Donna, can I ask you something? Whose name is on the deed to the cabin and the 80 acres? Mine, I said, just mine. Wallace left it to me outright, and in your current will, who inherits it? Russell, I said. It all goes to Russell, I said. It all goes to Russell. The house, the RRSP, the land, everything. She set down her pen. And is that still what you want? I looked out her window at the gray water and the lake freighters waiting out past the breakwall, and I thought about Wallace splitting wood with a 19-year-old version of the man who just called his land a money pit and his mother a liability. And I said, no, I don't think it is. What Ms. O'Coffer explained to me that morning changed the way I understood my own life. I had spent so many years thinking of my generosity as a kind of love that could never be returned the wrong way. The giving could only ever be good, but she put it to me differently. Generosity without boundaries, she said, isn't always love. Sometimes it just teaches people that you'll keep giving no matter how they treat you. And then they stop seeing the giving at all. They only notice when it stops. I changed my will that week. I'll tell you what I did, and I'll tell you because some of you wrote to me after my last story, asking how this works in Canada, practically speaking. And I want to be useful, not just sad. The brick bungalow in Algoma I left it to the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Foundation, the hospital where Wallace died, where the nurses in the cardiac unit had held my hand at 2 in the morning. The RRSP and my savings I split between a public library where I'd volunteered for 15 years and a literacy charity that buys books for kids up on the reserves north of us, kids who reminded me of the ones I'd taught. And the land, Wallace's 80 acres, I did the thing I'd been turning over in my mind for 3 sleepless nights. I did not simply leave it to Russell, but I did not punish the grandchildren for the sins of their parents either, and I want to be clear about that, because the last time I told a story like this, some of you rightly pushed back. You said, "How can a grandmother cut off innocent children?" And you were right to ask. So here's what I did. I worked with Miss Okafor to place the land into a trust. The cabin and the 80 acres would be held, protected, never sold. And when Hannah and Oliver each turned 25, old enough to understand what it meant, old enough to be out from under their parents' thumb, they would inherit it jointly with a trustee, not their parents. Managing it until then, Russell would have no claim to it, no ability to sell it, no ability to borrow against it. He'd called it a money pit. He wanted me to liquidate. Instead, I made sure he could never touch a single tree on it, and that one day his children would walk that land and know their great-grandfather built that cabin with his hands, and the down payment, the line of credit, the tuition. Ms. Okafor drew up a clean accounting of it, not because I planned to chase him for it, but because I wanted it on the record, in black and white, what had been given, a clause in the will, simple and plain. My son Russell has been generously provided for during my lifetime and requires nothing further from my estate. I signed it on a Thursday afternoon. Ms. Okafor's paralegal and the receptionist witnessed it. It took less than an hour to undo what I'd assumed for 30 years. And when I walked back out onto the street, into the cold off the harbor, I felt, I'm not going to lie to you, I felt lighter than I had in months. The call came 9 days later. I told no one. But Thunder Bay is a small city, and Ms. Okafor's firm shares a building with an accountant who does the books for Russell's old hockey coach. And I'll never know exactly how the thread got pulled. But it got pulled. On a Tuesday evening, my phone rang, and it was Russell, and his voice had a tightness in it I hadn't heard since he was a teenager caught in a lie. "Mom," he said, "I heard something strange today. I heard you changed your will, that you put the land in some kind of trust. That can't be right, can it?" I was sitting in my chair by the window with a cup of tea. "It's right," I said. "What do you mean it's right? Mom, that land, that's been in the family for 50 years. That's my inheritance. Dad would have wanted—" "Don't," I said. And I think the steadiness in my own voice surprised both of us. "Don't tell me what your father would have wanted. Your father built that cabin so his family would have a place to come together. 3 weeks ago, you told me it was a liability and called your mother an old woman and a money pit in the same breath. So don't you stand there and tell me what Wallace would have wanted." Silence. Then the pivot. And oh, I knew the pivot. I'd seen it 100 times. The voice went soft and reasonable. "Mom, you're upset. I get it. The Christmas thing, that came out wrong. We were stressed. Brittany's parents had already offered Collingwood, and it just made sense for the kids. I should have handled it better. Look, why don't I come up this weekend, just me and you, we'll talk it through, and you can call your lawyer and we'll get this trust thing straightened out." Okay? Straightened out. 3 weeks I'd been a liability. Now I was a problem to be straightened out. "There's nothing to straighten out," I said. "The land goes to Hannah and Oliver when they're 25. It's protected. You can't sell it and you can't borrow against it. I'd think you'd be happy your children are taken care of." That's when the soft voice cracked. "This is insane. You're punishing me, us, over one comment? Do you know how that sounds? A grown woman, holding a grudge, cutting her own son out, all because we wanted to do Christmas somewhere with skiing for the kids. You sound exactly like the bitter old woman you're pretending you're not." I didn't answer that. I just said, "Good night, Russell," and I hung up. He called back twice. I let it ring. The next morning, there was an email from Brittany. I'll spare you most of it. It was long, and it was the kind of letter that's been workshopped, where every cruel thing is wrapped in the language of concern. She wrote that they were worried about my decision-making lately, that isolation in old age can affect cognition, that perhaps I wasn't in the right frame of mind to be making major financial changes, and that they only wanted what was best for the family. She suggested, gently, that maybe I should be assessed. Assessed. My daughter-in-law, who had never once driven 4 hours north to see where her own children's father grew up, was suggesting I have my mind tested because I dared to make a decision she didn't like. I forwarded the email to Ms. Okafor. She called me within the hour. "Donna," she said, "I want you to do something for me, and I don't want you to be frightened by it. I want to set you up with a geriatrician for a full cognitive assessment, not because there's anything wrong with you, there clearly isn't, but because when people start using words like assessed and frame of mind in writing, they're laying groundwork. They may try to challenge the will, or worse, petition for guardianship. The best armor you can have is a clean, dated, professional report saying your mind is exactly as sharp as it is." So I went. Dr. Patel, at the regional hospital, the same hospital I'd just willed my house to, though he didn't know that. 2.5 hours of questions, memory tests, drawing clocks, recalling lists, explaining my own finances back to him in detail. At the end, he took off his glasses and said, "Mrs. Donna, I'll be frank. You're sharper than half the people half your age that I see in here. Whoever told you you needed assessing was either mistaken or had a reason. I'll have the report to your lawyer by Friday." I drove home that day and I cried. Finally, but they weren't sad tears. They were the tears of a woman who'd spent her whole life being agreeable and had just discovered at 72 that she had a spine. It got worse before it got better. It always does. Brittany's parents, I'd met them maybe 4 times, sent me a letter as well, a stiff, formal thing expressing their deep concern for Russell and Brittany's well-being, and the harm my rash actions were causing the children's sense of security. They CG'd Russell, of course. There was talk, relayed third hand through a cousin of Wallace's who still spoke to that side, of looking into options, of a lawyer of their own. And then, 2 days before Christmas, came the part that nearly broke me. A package arrived. Inside was a drawing, Hannah's drawing, in green and red crayon, of a little house with smoke coming out of the chimney, and 4 stick figures and 1 smaller stick figure off to the side with gray hair. And underneath, in a 6-year-old's careful printing, "Grandma's cabin. We miss you." And a note in Brittany's tidy hand, "The kids made this. They don't understand why we can't all be together. Please call Russell. It's not too late to fix this for them." Using the children. After everything, they were using the children. And the worst of it, the genuinely cruel part, was that it worked. For about an hour. I sat at Wallace's table with that drawing in my hands, and I sobbed, and I came that close to picking up the phone. I'd have given the land back, the house, all of it, just to have those babies near me. And then I made myself look at the drawing again, the gray-haired figure off to the side, apart from the others, and I understood that even in a child's crayon, even by accident, the truth had drawn itself. That was exactly how they positioned me, off to the side, near enough to give, far enough to forget. I didn't call Russell. I framed Hannah's drawing and I hung it in the front hall. And I called Miss Okafor instead and read her the note, and she said quietly, "Keep the note. Keep the envelope. Keep all of it." So I did. I spent Christmas Day alone, and I will tell you the strangest thing. It was not the worst Christmas of my life. The worst Christmas was the one 3 years after Wallace died, when I'd surrounded myself with family who were already, I see now, halfway out the door, and felt lonelier in that full room than I'd ever felt by myself. This Christmas, I cooked a small dinner. I called 2 old friends from the school. I went to the candlelight service at church, and a woman my age I'd only ever nodded to, named Joyce, asked if I had plans, and when I said no, she pulled me into her family's evening like it was the most natural thing in the world. I came home that night and I thought, I've been so afraid of being alone that I never noticed I was already lonely. In January, the formal letter came, a lawyer's letter on behalf of Russell and Brittany alleging undue influence and diminished capacity, and requesting that I voluntarily revisit the recent estate changes before they pursued other remedies. Missy, Okafor read it and actually laughed, which startled me. Donna, she said, they have nothing. They have a son who got cut out and a doctor's report that says you're sharp as a tack. This is a bluff. They're hoping you'll fold out of fear and guilt. We're not going to fold. And we didn't. She responded with a single, devastating package. Dr. Patel's cognitive report, the dated accounting of every dollar I'd given them over the years, the down payment, the line of credit, the 2 years of tuition, the Thanksgiving text, Brittany's "you should be assessed" email, and Hannah's drawing with a note about fixing it for them, laid out together, in order. It told one clear story, and it was not the story Russell and Brittany wanted told. Their lawyer dropped the matter within 2 weeks. There was never a courtroom. There was just a quiet, total collapse of the bluff. I will pretend there wasn't a cost on their side. Word travels in families and in small towns, and the version that traveled was not kind to them. I heard, eventually, that Brittany's marketing business lost a contract when it came out how she'd spoken to her elderly mother-in-law. I heard the line of credit I'd co-signed years ago had been quietly maxed and that without my safety net behind it, the bank had gotten nervous. I heard Russell and Brittany were arguing, that he blamed her, she blamed him. I took no joy in any of it. They were still my son and the mother of my grandchildren. But I didn't feel guilty either. I hadn't reached for any of it. They'd built that house themselves, on a foundation of treating people like resources, and foundations like that don't hold. What I built instead, that winter and spring, surprised me more than anything. I joined a snowshoeing group for women over 60, yes, at 72, snowshoeing, and don't you dare laugh, I fell on my backside twice and got back up both times. I started volunteering 3 mornings a week at the literacy charity I'd put in my will, reading with kids whose own grandparents were too far away or already gone. And the way a 7-year-old's face lights up when a word finally clicks, I'd forgotten that feeling from my teaching days. And getting it back was like finding a room in my own house I didn't know existed. Joyce and I became near inseparable. In April, we drove the north shore of Lake Superior together, all the way out to the Sleeping Giant, and stood on the cliffs in the wind, feeling about 30 years younger than we were. I went up to the cabin alone in May, once the road was clear. I was afraid it would be full of ghosts, Wallace and Russell as a boy, and the Christmases that wouldn't happen anymore. And it was full of them. But they weren't the grieving kind of ghost. I sat on the porch Wallace built, and I watched the light come down through the birches. And I felt him there, and I told him out loud what I'd done with his land, that it was safe, that it could never be sold off for someone's down payment, or borrowed against for someone's business, that one day Hannah and Oliver would have it, free and clear and theirs. And I swear to you, the wind came up through those trees like an answer. The grandchildren, that's the question you're all going to ask, so let me answer it. I have not given up on Hannah and Oliver, and I never will. They are 6 and 4. They did nothing. The trust is there for them, waiting, whatever happens between now and the day they turn 25. And I've told Russell, in the one short civil conversation we had this spring, that my door is open to those children any time, that there is no condition on it, that they can call me or come to me whenever they're allowed or whenever they're old enough to decide for themselves. I will not chase. I will not beg, but I will be here, a grandmother who got pushed to the side once, who refused to disappear and who left the porch light on. I'm 72. I lost a husband and, in a different way, I lost a son. But I want to tell you what I found, because I think it's the only part of this story that really matters. I found out that being someone's mother does not require you to be their bank. I found out that love and obligation are not the same thing, and that the people who blur them on purpose are usually after something. I found out that the family you choose, the Joyces of the world, the women who pull you into their Christmas because you happen to be alone, can hold you up just as surely as the family you were given. And I found out, late, at an age when I thought all my big discoveries were behind me, that it is never, ever too late to stop being treated as less than you are. So if you're out there with your bag half packed and your pride half swallowed, getting ready to drive 4 hours to sit at the edge of a table where you're tolerated but not wanted, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I'll tell you what I know now. Sitting in a house full of fresh flowers I bought for myself, with a 6-year-old's drawing framed in my front hall and Wallace's land safe under 100 years of birches, you are allowed to expect to be treated with respect by anyone, even by the children you raised, especially by them. And the day someone tells you that you're an old woman, a liability, a thing to be managed and assessed and moved off to the side, that does not have to be the day you lose your family. It can be the day you find yourself. I'm so glad you stayed with me to the end. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And have you ever had to choose your own dignity over someone else's convenience? I read every one. And if this story sat with you, stay a while. There are more of them coming, and there's a chair here for you anytime. The thing I keep coming back to, sitting here with Hannah's drawing framed in my front hall, is that nothing in this story happened by accident. Russell didn't wake up one morning a cruel man. It built, slowly, over years of me handing things over without ever once asking to be treated decently in return. Every check I wired, every penalty I paid on that RSP without complaint, every time I drove 4 hours and stayed in a hotel so I wouldn't be a bother. I thought I was loving him. What I was really doing was teaching him that my comfort cost nothing, that I would always be there to give and never there to be answered to. People become what we permit them to become. Brittany's coldness, the XO at the end of a text that kept me small, the email suggesting I be assessed. Those were not bolts from the sky. They were the harvest of seed that watered for 30 years without knowing it. So if there's anything I'd press into the hands of anyone listening, it's this. Be good to your people, yes. But goodness without a backbone isn't kindness. It's surrender. And the people closest to you will feel the difference even when you can't name it. Real decency means treating others well and insisting plainly that they treat you well too. That's not bitterness. That's the floor. And learn to see clearly even when seeing clearly breaks your heart. For 1.5 years, I had every piece of evidence in front of me. The shortened calls, the activities that never had a date, the land they kept telling me to sell, and I refused to read it because reading it meant admitting my own son saw me as a wallet. The day I finally sat in Ms. Okafor's office and let myself understand the pattern was the day I stopped being a victim of it. Wisdom isn't being clever. It's having the honesty to look at the truth you've been avoiding and the sense to act on it before it costs you everything. The last thing, and maybe the hardest, is the one I'm proudest of. There is a particular strength in an old woman that nobody warns the young about, the strength to stand at your own kitchen window with your bag half packed, feeling the entire pull of your love for your grandchildren. And to set the bag down anyway because you've decided your dignity is not for sale. I nearly broke 100 times, the crayon drawing nearly finished me, but I kept getting back up, the same way I kept getting back up on those snowshoes, laughing at myself in the snow at 72. Russell built his house on treating people like resources, and that kind of foundation never holds. I built mine, late in life, on respect, clear eyes, and the refusal to quit, and it held. It's holding still. That, in the end, was the inheritance I left myself.